San Jose State continues to be the doorway to the heart of global innovation. What we learn together now will benefit our community when we welcome everyone back to campus. SJSU, Silicon Valley's public university.
Welcome and thank you all of you for taking some time this afternoon and joining us for our second town hall on the San Jose State Adapt plan. I'd like to begin with an acknowledgement of the land on which we're standing. We acknowledge the land on which we are meeting as the traditional home of the Puichan Ohlone speaking people and the present-day Muwekma Ohlone tribe. The Puichan Ohlone were missionized into both missions Dolores and Santa Clara. The present-day Muwekma Ohlone tribe is comprised of all known surviving Native American lineages aboriginal to the San Francisco Bay region, who trace their ancestry through the missions San Jose, Santa Clara, and Dolores, and the historic federally recognized Verona Band of Alameda County. In the Muwekma Ohlone language, Chochenyo, Muwekma means the people. Without them, we would not have access to this gathering. We take this opportunity to thank the original caretakers of this land. Now, I hope you've all had a chance to see and read the SJSU Adapt website and the details that are in there. In the next hour, we'd like to highlight some key aspects of our plan and really address some of the questions that you have. And as a community here in San Jose and in truth across all our nation, we've been facing tremendous challenges these last several weeks. We're dealing, of course, with the global pandemic, shelter-in-place orders, opening up and closing again, and issues around economic disparities and distress, very powerfully challenges around systemic racism against our communities of color. And against this backdrop, we've been working to develop a 4-phase approach for the safe return to campus, whatever that might look like. I'd like to thank all of those SJSU staff members who have worked so hard on this plan. It's particularly hard when the plan isn't just an improvement that results in a clear result, but when it's changing every day. The complexity and the challenges due to the changing guidance and the unprecedented nature of this pandemic mean that what we think we're doing today may change tomorrow. And so the resilience and the adaptability of our team across the entire university has really been significant, and I thank each of you for all of your support in doing so. Now today we're going to highlight San Jose State's hybrid model for teaching and learning for the fall semester and the process for safely returning people and programs to campus. The majority of the time will be dedicated to answering your questions. So thank you to all of you who submitted questions in advance. We will try our best to answer all questions that affect as many people as possible. And for those that we don't reach today, we'll do what we can to put responses on the website through our FAQ page. I just want to emphasize that the health and safety of our students and the entire campus has guided everything that we've done since this pandemic broke in March. And so this again will drive the ADAPT plan and how it is ultimately how it unfolds as the time comes before us. So before I turn this over to our provost, Vincent Del Casino, I'd like to just mention a couple of things. If you'd like to submit a question for the Q&A session, please click on the Q&A button on your Zoom toolbar. We'll be monitoring that and we'll try to get to as many of those questions as we can. And I'd also like to just remind everyone that we are recording today's session, and this recording will be made available on the Health Advisories page on the SJSU website. I'd now like to turn it over to Vin, who will kick things off with a discussion about our teaching and learning plan. Vin, over to you.
Thank you so much, President Papazian, and Thank you for everybody taking time to join us today and be part of this conversation. Obviously, this summer has been an intense one for everyone here at the university as we plan to really ramp up what we've been doing through the spring and now into the fall, knowing where we are with this current pandemic. On the big picture, what I'd like to outline is just a few implications to our teaching and learning plan for this fall, given where we currently are today and what we know today. The first is that San Jose State is implementing a hybrid campus model. What this means is about 90% of our classes are going to be taught remotely. They'll either be taught synchronously, where you might come into a meeting all together. Some of them might be taught asynchronously, where people jump in at different times. But about 90% of the classes will be there. This will allow us then to have about 10% of classes that are either full-time or part-time on campus, where students can really be safe, as well as faculty and staff, and monitor the particular needs we have to protect ourselves against this pandemic. The classes that you're going to find that are largely face-to-face are in kinesiology, our athletics classes, which students need a couple of credits in that area to graduate. A lot of our STEM or science, technology, engineering, and some mathematics classes, particularly upper division courses that need labs. Our dance, art, and music studio programs where people need that one-on-one or multiple person interaction. But again, we're going to do this in a way that each one of our areas will be safe relative to the pandemic. What I want you to know as well is you can find all this information within the catalog itself. So when you go into the course schedule, you can already see whether or not your course is going to be online completely or have any face-to-face component. For those who are international students, you'll be able to take, if you're living abroad, you'll be able to take your courses 100% online. If you're in the country, you'll have that same access to the mix. But if you're a current returning student, you won't have any trouble finding the schedule for you. If you're a new student coming to the campus and you're still trying to plan to come to the country, you want to make sure you talk to an advisor so you have the right mix of classes if that's the case. The other important key here is that all our in-person courses are going to practice what Santa Clara County has set up for physical distancing and wearing of masks. That means teachers and students will all be wearing masks, as will staff when they come onto the campus. And this is important because it's critical that we do as much as possible. In fact, we're even looking at the possibility of using outdoor space for some of our interactions so that we can minimize the amount of contact time people have. But you will find if you're in a lab or in any other situation, you're going to see far fewer people at any given time in any of those spaces. Where a lab might normally have 20 or 25, it will probably only have 4 or 5 students at a time, along with the faculty and any teaching assistants. The other important thing is, despite the fact that we have this online environment, this largely remote environment, we're going to meet each student where they are, trying to provide a balance of services for those students who are here face-to-face and those students who are online. Our writing center is fully remote and available to people, but we're hoping as well that we'll have different levels of connection that we can draw for people if, for example, there needs to be face-to-face programming or anything like that. Now, many people have asked, how does a campus the size of San Jose State turn on a dime almost from being a largely residential, close proximity, everyone on campus every day, to one where remote learning, teaching and learning is the norm? Well, I will tell you, the faculty and many staff have invested hundreds of hours this summer thinking about how to move forward. And one of the things we've done is develop a Teach Online Summer Certificate program. We had almost 1,000 faculty, actually a little more than 1,000 faculty, sign up for that teaching program, which is more than half the faculty on the campus. We're setting this up and preparing to deliver high quality online and remote programming that meets the same expectations that our face-to-face classes meet. What this also means is we have a learn anywhere strategy designed to help as many students as possible. And we're trying to meet every single person as best we can where they are. Now, you may find that some class is face-to-face. Faculty are working on different ways to accommodate that if you have to be remote. Each one of those will work on an individual basis, but we're working as best we can to manage every single student need. So please pay attention to your syllabus. Look at what it says about meeting times and patterns, when things are due. This is going to be a different pace for some students than it has been in previous semesters, and we want you to be able to pay attention to where we are. Finally, I will say, if in some off chance things change, we will be updating where we are in terms of which classes will be in the remote versus the face-to-face mode. So please pay attention and check in often, but we're trying to communicate as much as possible. Let me just say, big picture, everyone is excited to get back to the classrooms. We wish that it was a different kind of fall semester, but it's really exciting for me and everyone here to get back to what we love to do, which is to provide the highest quality education at a public university price in one of the most exciting, innovative, and dynamic regions in the country. So thank you, and look forward to seeing everyone this fall. At this point, then, it is my pleasure to introduce Traci Ferdolage, who's our Senior Associate Vice President for Facilities Development and Operations. She's going to share a bit of information about how our SJSU Adapt plan is getting us ready to return to campus.
Thank you, Vin, and good afternoon, everyone. As we prepare to discuss the eventual return to campus, it is important to first remind you that we are in phase 2 of the 4-phase SJSU Adapt plan. Phase 2 calls for only essential staff to report to campus, with telework being highly encouraged. All other employees need permission from their supervisor before coming to campus. The 4-phase plan does not move in a straight line. We could move back to phase 1 if the county public health guidelines call for a full shelter in place like we experienced in the spring. SJSU could also move to phase 3 as county guidelines change and allow more people to be on campus safely, although telework would continue to be encouraged. Any move from phase 2 to phase 3 would be gradual. Employees and students would not be expected to report in a day or in a week. Looking ahead to welcoming more people on campus for the fall semester, there are several protocols that SJSU has put into place to keep the campus community safe. The university requests that all students, faculty, and staff self-check for symptoms associated with COVID-19 before coming to campus. The symptoms for which the CDC currently advises you self-check for include cough, fever above 100.4 degrees, chills, shortness of breath or difficulty breathing, muscle or body aches, sore throat, a new loss of taste or smell, a stuffy or runny nose, diarrhea, headache, nausea, or vomiting. If you feel sick or have the symptoms I just mentioned and cannot attribute them to some other cause, you may not come to campus. Employees, including those who are at greater risk for contracting COVID-19, may exercise use of available leave programs for which they are eligible. Information about leave programs is available through university personnel. Face coverings are required on campus whenever indoors, except when you are alone in a floor-to-ceiling office with the door closed shut. Students will not have to wear a face mask if they are living in a university housing and are inside of their apartment. Face coverings must also be worn outside if it may be difficult for you to maintain 6 feet of distancing from others. The campus community is encouraged to wear their own personal face covering, but be advised that the CDC recommends reusable cloth face coverings be properly laundered after each use. The university will also have disposable face coverings, hand sanitizer, and gloves available at multiple locations on campus. Additional cleaning supplies will also be provided as requested. Employees are also expected to sanitize their own workstation regularly and clean any shared equipment such as keyboards, remote controls, and the like. We ask that you do this before and after each use. As more people make their way to the campus in the fall, it is important to remind you that FD&O and Environmental Health and Safety have been collaborating with departments across the campus to proactively walk workspaces and campus locations so as to ensure the university meets county, state, and CSU guidelines and the individual needs of specific spaces and departments. As a reminder, employee repopulation will take place gradually. The health and safety of the campus community is our highest priority, and we are taking steps to ensure that whenever Spartans arrive back on campus, they will feel safe. I would like to now introduce Lisa Malora, the Vice President for Strategy and Chief of Staff, who will be leading the Q&A portion of this town hall. Lisa?
Thank you, Traci. Thank you all for being here with us today. The remainder of this meeting will be dedicated to Q&A. And as a reminder, you can submit any questions that you have through the Q&A button at the bottom of your toolbar. We'll do our best to answer all the questions submitted. And if we are unable to address all of the questions, we will be sure to answer them and post them on the Health Advisory's website. We received a lot of questions through the registration process, and many of them concerned the recent CSU message regarding layoffs. So although this town hall is about the SJSU Adapt plan, President Papazian would like to open the Q&A session by responding to these questions. President Papazian, to begin, what is the administration doing regarding potential faculty and staff layoffs due to the state budget cuts?
Well, thank you, Lisa, for the question. And I know this has been, you know, a time of great uncertainty and anxiety for a lot of people. So I'm glad to address this right up front. The chancellor has, you know, issued his memo, which I think many of you have seen, which authorizes campuses, if they so need to or choose to move in the direction of layoffs. The authorization comes centrally because we have a central collective bargaining agreement or a statewide collective bargaining agreement, but the decisions are local decisions. And so we've made a commitment here to do everything we can to ensure the stability, employment stability of as many of our staff and faculty as we can. So we're working through the budget right now. We will be, you know, looking at using our reserves in many ways, not wiping them out, but using a significant number in order to bridge us through. And then we're looking at the needs. Right now, I think we're going to be able to protect the employment of many on our campus. And if you have any concerns at all about this, I would ask you to reach out to your managers and just see where things stand. The truth is we're expecting a very solid enrollment, and so we will have a great deal of need for many on our campus. And with that enrollment stable, we have a much better chance of being able to maintain, you know, the jobs of everyone. There are still some unknowns, as I said, that are out there. We have preliminary numbers coming out of the state. We don't have the final budget, but we're pretty confident we will land where we are now. So that's helpful as we do our planning. We have our enrollment numbers, but again, none of that is final. We still have a couple of pay periods left to go, and we haven't reached census yet. That'll happen in September. But if things hold steady, and we're watching it every day, and I just want to give a kudos to our entire enrollment management team who have done an extraordinary job all summer, as well as our faculty, our chairs, our deans, our associate deans throughout academic affairs. This is a huge part of what we need to do. But there are still some other areas where we have some concern, and we'll be paying close attention to it. But our commitment, as much as possible, is to you. And I know there is a process, and we'll have the technical process we can outline, but that's the approach that we're taking.
Thank you. I know that one of the concerns that someone wrote in about today was about federal funding. Someone wrote in and asked, will President Trump pull federal funding from the CSU for not being open in the fall?
Well, that's the statement. There's actually, it's hard for the president to do that. We're funded primarily from two sources, from the state, and it's not federal authority to determine how states spend their funds, and from, of course, tuition and fees. And so the likelihood of the president being able to do that is actually very small. If it's congressionally appropriated money through the Pell system, for example, then there would have to go through Congress, and that tends not to be something that the courts uphold. There's still the negotiations around the latest relief package that is now in negotiation between the House and the Senate, the HEROES Act in the House and the HEALS Act in the Senate. There's significant funding for higher ed there. What will finally emerge, we're not sure, but the likelihood of the president being able to do that is very, very small.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Joanne Wright, Senior Associate Vice President for University Personnel, to join us for the next question. Joanne, are furloughs still being considered? And what can you say about other cost-saving options like shutdown days, temporary layoffs, and voluntary retirement?
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, so first of all, furloughs would be system-wide, so would be determined at that level in consultation with CSU unions. And as stated by Chancellor White in his message of July 20th, there is no plan to negotiate these this fiscal year, but they may be necessary next fiscal year. So that would be 2021 to 22. Meanwhile, we will consider various ways to work with the budget challenges that we have while doing our best, as President Papazian just stated, to protect employee job stability. So this may include voluntary programs, and we would discuss these and other options with our unions as appropriate.
Okay. And can you say anything else about layoffs? What will the prioritization be for layoffs? When would they start? How would employees be notified?
Okay, so again, I just want to reiterate that our goal is to do our best to protect employee job stability as we consider various ways to work with budget challenges. So my response here is simply to provide information as to the procedure should layoffs occur. As many of you know, there are layoff protocols in our CBAs, and generally order of layoff would begin with hourly, temporary, and probationary employees, followed by permanent employees in order of seniority. There's notification requirements. A notice must be provided a certain number of days in advance of an actual layoff, for example. So in short, if there were to be layoffs, we would follow all required protocols, including appropriate notifications. And if there were to be staff layoffs, we would not anticipate these occurring before the fall semester due to notification requirements. If there were to be MPP layoffs, there are not the same notice requirements, so these could theoretically occur prior to that following assessment to determine areas where reductions could occur.
Can you say a little bit about student assistants? What will happen to student assistants, and can those jobs be preserved?
Well, this would depend on the nature of the work and the areas where student assistants are assigned and working with budget considerations in those areas. So we are looking at maximizing efficiencies, which may, in many areas, reduce the need for student assistants. So, we would have to look at this closely.
Thank you, Joanne. Stay right here. I'm going to ask Charlie Foss, our Vice President for Administration and Finance and CFO, to join us. Charlie, when is the 2020-21 budget set to come out? And what have been some challenges in curating it given the impacts left by COVID-19?
So we've had a lot of challenges, as the President had alluded to earlier here. We have our final budget from the state at this point and from the CSU, and we're continuing to work on that and continuing to get those final numbers and react to those final numbers. And that's dependent on enrollment and who shows up here in the fall and how we continue to react to the COVID-19 situation in various areas around the campus. When, as far as the delivery of the budget, it's the same as it's always been. We will work on the budget over the course of this summer. We will fine tune it in the early part of September. It gets presented over to the Academic Senate in the mid or to early part of October. So those things are going to continue to happen. But as we've all learned in these past months, it's about being flexible. It's about being able to adapt. It's about recognizing our landscape is constantly changing here, and we have been blessed by having a good amount of reserves, but nowhere near enough reserves. And the state has been that way. And our commitment is to use those reserves as the state has used them, as the chancellor has talked about, and work those reserves down in a real systematic way where this is going to be a multi-year process. And so we can't use all our reserves up in 1 year. This is going to take 2-3 years at least to go through this. And we'll see where the state funding comes from at that point. But we are going to use those reserves and be very transparent about that process.
Charlie. I'm going to go back to Joanne, and Charlie, you can jump in on this question as well. Perhaps President Papazian, you might like to speak to this. In Chancellor White's July 20th email, it was stated that layoffs have begun. What type of positions have been experiencing layoffs at this point? So perhaps some clarification first.
Yeah.
From the president, and then Joanne and Charlie, if you have anything to add.
Perfect. Thank you, Lisa. The chancellor's memo really is for the system as a whole. And so what you'll find is that different campuses will need to respond in different ways. As I said initially, the actual decisions around layoffs and who would be laid off, what job area, for example, is a campus by campus decision. And so there may well be campuses, and I believe there are a few, I think it's a small number, but they are out there, who already have begun that process. And so that may be what you're hearing. We are not yet at that stage. And I'll let Joanne take where we are now and in terms of what the next steps are.
Right, so just to follow up on what President Papazian just stated, so there are campuses, we're aware in the CSU system, very different situations that we are in. They may already have been experiencing some enrollment difficulties even prior to COVID. So that has made them even more vulnerable with COVID here now. So again, we are at the point where we're looking at our budgets, working with Charlie's group to see, what types of voluntary programs there might be or whatever we need to do to, again, try to protect as many jobs as possible. So that's where we are. And again, enrollments numbers are looking good from my understanding. And so we, again, are a very different position than a number of other campuses. So if you're hearing things from other campuses, it's because they're in different situations. So again, all very different, and we are following our own path on this.
Thank you, Joanne. That might be it for you for right now. Charlie, do you want to add anything to that before I go to the next question for you?
No, I think they did a wonderful job.
Okay, great. So the next question is actually follows up from your last answer. How much funding did SJSU receive from the CARES Act? What are some of the things that those reserves could go to?
So we got $28.8 million from the Federal CARES Act, and that really came in 2 tranches, 14.4 of which we drew down in the April-May timeframe, and that was sent directly out to students. It was distributed in the spring, and almost all of those monies have been distributed and has gone out. The second 14.4 that are for COVID-19 related impacts to the campus, we have not yet drawn, but we will be drawing. Examples of what we can use that for: instruction related expenses. We're doing a lot of training this summer of our faculty, for online teaching and being better in that space and excelling. It's in parking, housing, dining. We had a lot of folks that we let out of their leases in the March timeframe through April, and so those refunds could be eligible. A lot of cleaning expenses, maintenance expenses, and additional IT expenses that we're seeing and continuing to see related to COVID-19.
Thanks, Charlie. One more question for you. Is the moratorium on non-essential travel because we are eradicating our travel budget?
Well, our travel budget isn't all that big, so I don't think we're eradicating our travel budget. It's a mandate that's coming out of the Chancellor's office that non-essential travel be restricted. And so very limited travel, research-based travel, in a few other cases that some of that might happen. But no, this is not a budget cut. This is a reality of people will not be traveling over the next 12 months.
Thank you, Charlie. I think that's it for you for right now. President Papazian, what can you say about in-person classes? If Santa Clara County declared no in-person classes, how is SJSU planning to have in-person classes? Isn't this against the guidelines?
Well, I'm going to let Provost Del Casino take this in just a moment, but yes, we are actually going to be aligning with the guidelines. We have an obligation to do that. At this point, the numbers are rather small. They may shrink more depending on what the rhythm of the pandemic is in our region, but we'll be paying close attention to that. As I said up front, our focus is on health and safety. At the same time, we have a small number where it really is necessary for the academic progress of our students. And the idea here is if we thin out the campus enough under those circumstances, we can create the distancing that's necessary and the safety that's necessary so that those students who need these particular courses in order to continue to make progress or graduate in an area and field that requires it, that we're able to accommodate that in a safe way. But I'll turn it over to the provost who's looked at these in a great deal of detail.
Thank you, President Papazian. It's a fantastic question. We've been working very closely with Santa Clara Public Health. In fact, we've been meeting regularly with them, both in the general sense as well as in the area of meeting about contact tracing and other sorts of things. And under the guidelines, higher education has a dispensation to look at what is needed relative to face-to-face and fully online. And so we're given the flexibility. What we've done, as the president has talked about then, is identified that very small group of classes that in an ideal world would still have some face-to-face contact. In fact, most of them will rarely meet even every week. They'll be cycling students into labs and so forth. But we're doing everything within the context of the guidelines as they've currently been provided. If something changes and let's say the county slips back to full shelter in place, then we're going to have to reevaluate the entire catalog of courses. So we take this on a day-to-day basis. And that's why it's so important for everybody to check in on a regular basis with their with the catalog and with the schedule of classes, just to make sure they've got everything in the right place at the right time. But we're absolutely connected and to the Santa Clara Public Health guidelines and focusing on those very closely so that we offer the safest experience possible for our students, some of whom will even be living on campus in the fall.
Thanks, Vin. I'll come back to you with a set of questions, but for right now, I think we're all set for you. President Papazian, I know you've been working with a number of different campus leaders on developing the SJSU Adapt plan, and there are a number of protocols that are already in place. How do you anticipate that protocols will change once a vaccine is available?
Well, thanks for the optimism in that question, because it assumes we'll have a vaccine soon. Look, the reality is this, that the work is moving as quickly as possible to develop a vaccine that is tested and safe and hence can be approved. But most vaccines take years to develop. This will be much, much faster, but it will still take time. And the best numbers I've been seeing in terms of the time frame, I'm not going to name any company right now because I'm not going to do a plug for any particular company, but there's several that are already in trials. We're probably talking, the earliest is the very end of this calendar year and the beginning of the next. And that's only if the trials actually produce the kind of safety, immunity, et cetera, that is needed before anything can be brought to scale. And then there's the process of actually producing those, distributing them. We really are talking months. And so I don't anticipate that we'll be addressing this until we're well into, I don't even know if the spring will be too soon. This will probably be a conversation for the next year if all goes well. And certainly as this or any other circumstances change, both positive or negative, the protocols may well change as well.
I think that's a perfect lead into another question for you. Will SJSU plan to operate in a remote or hybrid environment through spring 2021 semester? How and when will we know?
Well, we're planning going into the next spring. We will plan to be prepared to model the spring as we have the fall. We are hopeful. I think we would all like to see us able to move at least a little more in person. I don't anticipate we'll be fully in person, though I suppose stranger things have happened. But we think it's the most prudent thing to do is to plan for the models that we're currently preparing for the fall. And then if things do look to improve, probably not because we have a ready vaccine that we all can take and feel that we have the herd immunity, but because we've actually controlled the surge and that we have controlled the outbreaks in our region. And so like other parts of the world, perhaps we're able to be back in person. That certainly is possible. And if that were the case, we would easily be able to bring a certain number of courses back to face-to-face or to hybrid so that there's some in person, even though not all in person. And we'll assess that. It's much easier to go from the more remote environment back to a hybrid or fully face-to-face than the other way around. So I would suggest continue to keep your eyes. We'll be updating the Health Advisory's website throughout the fall. And as we have more information and a sense of where this is going, as we get into the fall and anticipate the spring, we'll certainly be updating the campus community.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Vin to join you for the next question, which is about the future landscape. Once we have returned to phase 4 in future academic years, whether it's 2021 to 2022 or beyond, what do you envision the landscape of courses will look like? Will more of the previously in-person classes continue to be offered online, or will most classes return to in-person delivery?
Well, I'll start and then I'll turn it over to the provost who really oversees the teaching and learning environment. But let me start this way. I don't anticipate that we will go back to where we were entirely before the pandemic broke. I think we will probably have some changes. We are learning, for example, and again, to have over 1,000 faculty really committing their time this summer to creating an engaged learning environment for our students, speaks to a commitment by our faculty to really, think about the learning environment for students. There will be some things that come out of this where we say, that worked really well, and that will depend on the course, the learning outcomes that faculty are interested in. There are some students who thrive in that environment and others who are more comfortable in a hybrid, but it will look different. And I think we will, I hope as faculty, engage over this fall, they're really thinking about what we're learning that is good and where does it really not work well this way. The other thing I would just say is that, we are committed to meeting students where they are. And where they are in the future may look a little different from where they were in the past. And I think we will have a lot more flexibility to fulfill the core mission of the institution because we have expanded our skill base in terms of how to engage with students. But now I'm stepping on the provost's work, so I'm going to turn it over to him.
No, I think what the president said is right. I think in every moment in time, you have to evaluate where you are and where you're going to be. And I think this is a perfect moment for us to step back and go, we have a very limited physical plant, 90 acres in the heart of one of the most expensive regions in the world, delivering a public education that I would argue is as excellent as any in the Valley and in the country. And to do that well and to scale that at any level, to increase access to our environment means adapting ourselves to the ways in which we might teach and learn. The other thing we know is students have long struggled with some of the long commutes and other things as a faculty and staff. And I think it's an opportunity for us to think a little bit about that, to what the president said, meeting students where they are, transforming our teaching and learning environment to support those students and faculty and staff. The other thing that I think is going to happen, and it's going to happen, higher ed will either lead in this space or follow. Work is going to change. The meaning of work and how we work is going to change. We've already seen this in many of the corporate spaces of the Valley, where where they're like, you know what, this telecommuting thing is actually operating well for us. What can we do? Our own supervisor of the County of Santa Clara, the leader of the supervisors, has suggested maybe we only should come back at like 75% of our workforce doing the regular day-to-day. I think we're going to see more flexible kinds of work environments. I think we're going to see more flexible kinds of K-12. I think all these things are going to have an impact, and we're either going to be leading in this space, the conversations, or we're going to be following along. I'd like to be in a place leading. It does not mean that I think that everything should be online or everything should be hybrid. I think it does allow us, though, to think about what we think the future university could and should be, and how do we build a place that we think is really sustainable, and how do we increase access to the amazing resources, the incredible faculty, the awesome staff, and the amazing students we have here.
Thank you so much. Then I'm going to ask you to stay with me. President Papazian, thank you for all your responses. Then let's go back to some of the questions about hybrid. You spoke to this a little bit in your opening comments. What will a hybrid semester look like? Can students take all of their classes fully online in the fall?
For many, many students, all their classes will be remote. They'll either be kind of in that fully online model or some level of synchronous learning, face-to-face learning, but through a remote environment. So for most people, they'll be in that online space, that virtual space. That's 90% of our classes. In fact, certain colleges and programs, 100% of their courses will be delivered that way. The hybridity comes with the fact that about 9 to 10% of our classes will have some level of face-to-face component. And those are really focused in areas where hands-on work is in high demand. It includes the STEM fields, it includes labs, it includes art, dance, and music. It includes some clinical health areas where you really have to work through certain problems as best you can. For that, then, students are going to have some level of face-to-face experience. And that is a really important way to think about this.
Thank you. Just to be clear, is there a limit on the number of hybrid courses that a student can enroll in?
There are no limits. You take the right classes for you to keep yourself progressing through your degree. So you may be an art studio student at a senior level with a lot of those classes stacked up, and you may find yourself on campus more often than some other students. In fact, we believe of the 10% of classes that'll be offered with some level of face-to-face, that many of those classes will have the same students in a couple of them.
So since you've mentioned the catalog already, we know that many classes will be online or virtual. Will they still be meeting online at the same time? And will professors let students know in advance what days they need to show up for class in person?
Every single class, like the classes you have now, will have a slightly different organizational structure. So paying attention to your syllabus and looking at the schedule of classes and making sure you understand, oh, this class is going to meet with everyone together on Tuesdays at 11 o'clock, but the other one is probably going to be more flexible, right? All of that will be written down and explained to you, and it'll show up in the schedule of classes. So right now, if you see a meeting pattern where it says the class is online, but you're meeting Tuesday, Thursday from 11 to 12:15, that means that schedule's you're going to meet during those times together collectively. In other places, you might see TBA, which means really look at the schedule, really look at the syllabus to understand how the instructor is delivering that part of the curriculum. So the key is really paying attention to all your materials in front of you, logging into your courses as soon as you can, and getting a sense of your pattern and rhythm. This is going to take a little different kind of time management than we might think.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask Charlie to join you for the next question. And Charlie, perhaps you can give the first response and then Vin can add to this. Being mostly online makes it feel like the overall student experience is reduced. Is tuition staying the same? And if so, why?
So we've looked long and hard at this. With our institution, we have about 80% of our expenses are people-related expenses. We, it's costing us as much or more to be going online than it was regular because instruction-related expenses are continuing. It's not appropriate to reduce tuition at this time, and that's a chancellor decision. It's not a local one, and they've said it's going to be flat tuition in the fall from last year, same as our fees, flat again. It's also not inappropriate here to reduce mandatory campus fees, except in some very limited circumstances, because reducing the tuition, reducing the fees in all this economic impacts that are going on could increase employee layoffs. It adversely impact all our course availability that's out there, the programs. It's going to increase the time of graduation for our students, all the things against student success. And to ensure the university can make its programs and facilities available to students now and in the future, we need to continue to support these areas. As a aside, yesterday we opened up SRAC for lap swimming. And so we are looking at each of our facilities uniquely as we go and trying to find ways of engaging them further with our students rather than just online. With SRAC, it's going to be an in-person experience for people.
Thanks, Charlie. Vin, would you like to add anything to that?
Well, I actually come from the background of having built and developed a fully online campus at another institution. And one of the misnomers about online education is at some level, it's really less expensive. And the truth is, particularly at the startup, there are so many costs. As Charlie mentioned, most of this is human labor, and the amount of human labor is actually increased. We invested in faculty this summer with stipends so that they could take the workshop and at least get some compensation for it. So when you look at the overall costs and so forth, could those reduce over long periods of time? Possibly, but each one of those comes with new technology needs, right? As we go more online and more remote, it comes with new staffing needs in the IT area. It comes with support needs that we didn't have to have before. So each one of these things is really complicated. And I don't think the education has become less expensive as a result of what we're doing. More importantly, a lot of faculty and a lot of staff and a lot of other people are dedicating themselves to returning to a high quality fall semester where the student learning outcomes are met in the classes in the same way that they've always been met.
Thank you both. Charlie, I think we're all set with you for now. Then I have a couple more questions for you. A student asked, what if I am enrolled and need an in-person class to graduate, but do not want to come to campus due to the virus?
For each and every student, we're going to try to accommodate as much as humanly possible. In many of the cases that we have some face-to-face courses, they're working on remotely transmitting some of that learning. So we're hoping that even if you can't make a lab, there might be an opportunity to access it remotely. The second thing that could happen is we might substitute a course. If it's one course or something, where you might have to take something else. There is a small chance that if there's really limited things that we can do to meet the learning outcome of a particular course and give you a degree, that we might have to do something in the summer or one semester later. But we're trying to mitigate all of those right now with as many options as possible for each class available. So we're really hoping that we don't run into the situation where students have these classes that they need but can't complete their degree.
Thanks. I have one more question just for you before we bring Joanne back to join you. What will labs look like?
Well, they'll still be square and they still have tables and things like that in them. I think that's fair to say. In all joking aside, they're going to look as they did, except with a lot less people in them. And all those people are going to have masks, and they're going to probably even have eyewear, which is common, and they're going to be spread out. And we're going to try to rotate people out of the rooms on a regular basis, and we're going to try to provide as much space as possible for people to distance themselves. The other thing that a lot of the programs are doing, and I mentioned this earlier, but it's important to remind people, typically you would go to a lab class every week. What we're trying to do is rotate people in maybe once every 2 weeks to the lab and do the other parts of the lab as much as possible remotely. So we're really, if you think about a 16-week course where you might have been in a lab 16 times, you might only be in that lab 4 times this semester. But those 4 times will be the essential hands-on work that you need to have.
Thanks, Ben. I'm going to ask Joanne to join you, and she can respond to this question first, and feel free to add if there's anything that might be helpful. A participant wrote in that teaching from home increases the financial burden, Wi-Fi, electricity, printing. Will SJSU employees get a stipend or allowance for internet, Wi-Fi, and phones?
Okay, so I just wanted to remind faculty that they are able to come to campus for purposes of delivering and facilitating remote learning. But just check in with your chair and dean about that, if that's something that you feel that you need to do to access equipment or have more comfort in your office on campus. But in addition, if there are items that are needed at this time for teaching online, you may request them from your department, or may request, if you have concerns and needs, request this from your department or college. So I would really highly encourage you to reach out to people in your department and college if there are concerns or needs in these areas.
And just to add to that, thank you very much, Joanne. Just to add to that quickly, each one of the colleges was asked to develop a list of equipment needs. This is on top of our central IT support. So our central IT office has been incredibly responsive to the needs of faculty and staff, providing equipment really quickly in cases where people don't have the right materials in front of them. But in addition, in this pandemic, as we have done in other places, the university is investing into the crisis in order to make sure everybody has what they need. And we now have a very robust list of core needs that are more particular to colleges and programs. So I agree with Joanne, you need to talk to your direct supervisors and make sure you're set up with the right equipment in order to be successful. And if you need to, you can come to campus and use your office as a way to deliver. If you're not in a condition of having your own private office, that's something we will work on as well at the department levels for various faculty as needed.
Thank you. There's a question that came in as a follow-up to an earlier comment that was made. This is for both of you. Will the faculty who did not get a chance to participate in the online teaching certificate program have a higher likelihood to be laid off?
Joanne, if you'd like, I'm happy to start with this one.
Go ahead.
I know where she's going. The short answer is no. We're not looking at that. In fact, we've signed a memorandum of understanding with the union about that, but it was not intended as a litmus test. It was intended to try to provide as much support as possible, and not everyone was able to take advantage of it. We actually hope to have other trainings throughout the year so that we can continue to scale this work. So I encourage you to look for future training opportunities if you couldn't take advantage of this one.
Yeah, I agree with that. So yeah, just to reiterate, there is a system-wide MOU signed about these additional programs for training. They cannot be considered as far as assignments go. So it's really not something that we look at in making assignments. So again, that's something that we would not consider. So I hope that reassures you.
Thank you. Then thank you for your responses. I'm going to keep Joanne for a couple of questions, and I'm going to ask Charlie to join us for this next one. If my department is fairly stable in its budget, is it possible for our staff to experience layoffs or become bumped out to compensate for other departments that may be unstable in their budgets? Charlie, would you like to begin?
Sure. The approach that we have been taking has been kind of a macro approach, and we're not looking to tax various departments to compensate other areas. We're looking at targeted layoffs if layoffs are necessary, and not pervasive layoffs by any means. And when I say layoffs, I'll also say budget cuts. We're looking at targeted budget cuts or reactions We're not looking at sweeping 10% or 20% across the board. It's really targeted. Joanne?
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that, so we're all in this together. So it's not that we would be separating out, different departments and keeping people as islands. So we would be looking at the whole and determining, what areas, according to assessment, what areas need perhaps to have some trimming done or could afford to do that. And also we would follow any layoff protocols that we would need to follow based on the CBA. So that, would probably affect groups of people in different areas, if that's what we got to.
Thanks, Joanne. Charlie, thank you. I'm going to ask President Papazian to come back for this next question. President Papazian, has the university considered making telecommuting a long-term option so that staff can consider moving farther out of the Bay Area?
Well, honestly, we haven't really assessed where we want to be on the other side of all of this. So so I can't really say yet. As the Provost mentioned earlier, we certainly are seeing our some of our major companies around us moving in that direction, and it will take time before we are all back here. So there will probably be flexibility even long term. What that flexibility will look like at this point, I really don't know. But I imagine that those conversations will certainly take place.
Thank you, President Papazian. And Joanne, I have one more question for you before we move on to our next panelist. Will weekly testing be mandated in order for employees to work on campus?
Well, so as of today, testing is not mandated in order for employees to work on campus. So, however, students and employees who are living and or working on campus are encouraged to be tested once a month per Santa Clara County Public Health Department guidance. Testing can be done through an individual's primary care provider, as well as through one of several free county testing sites. And those can be accessed through www.sccfreetest.org.
Thank you, Joanne. I'm going to ask a new set of questions to Rob Drury, our administrator in charge of the Student Wellness Center. Similar topic, Rob. When would I expect to hear something, or when should I expect to hear something if I might have been exposed to COVID-19?
Good afternoon, Spartans. When a person reports that they are positive on the San Jose State Health Advisory's website, on the Report a Case tab, a small team jumps into action, reviewing the information and sets up a case management interview. If it is found that one or more SJSU community members was a close contact, they will be notified right away.
What constitutes someone being exposed?
For COVID-19, the Centers for Disease Control defines it as a close contact is defined as anyone who has had contact within 6 feet of a person that's infected for at least 15 minutes, starting from 48 hours before the person began feeling ill until that person was isolated.
Thank you. Can you say a little bit about how contact tracing will be done without revealing who has been tested and tested positive?
So when our case managers speak with potential close contacts, they will not be sharing the identity of the positive person to protect their privacy.
Thank you. And I think that relates to the very last question for you. How and when will we hear communication about future COVID cases for people who have been on campus?
We do record this info on that page I mentioned before, the SJSU Health Advisory's website. On the Report a Case tab, you'll see the number change as things happen. So if you go there right now, it says there was 20 cases since this all began, and that number will increase as we come across more cases.
Thank you, Rob. Next, I'm going to invite Patrick Day, our Vice President for Student Affairs, to respond to a few questions. Patrick, although classes will be remote, Will students who don't have classes be permitted on campus?
Certainly. There will be reasons for some students to come to the campus. There's no prohibition for students joining us on campus. There may be some opportunity. We may have some students who are utilizing certain elements of the union. We've opened up part of SRAC as we shared. The one thing that will remain sort of a semi-closed space will be our residence halls. And part of that is so that we can try and maintain some control over that environment. And so we are not allowing guests to come into the building at this point.
Can you tell students and actually everyone who is on this webinar, what on-campus student services and activities will be available this fall 2020?
Sure. So I think it's going to be evolving. I think as of today, our plan will likely have some form of the union available. It certainly will look different than it looked last fall, but that may be a space that students can take advantage of for whether it be very brief and socially distant connections or utilization of the Wi-Fi or some socially distant meetings where that may be appropriate. We will have during some days of the week, the Wellness Center will be open, though we will also continue to provide access to services via telehealth as we're currently doing. It is likely that, and we're still working on, that we'll have some form of library engagement that will allow students to be able to access those services on the campus. And we will take a look, particularly as we listen to what is happening with the epidemiology associated with this virus, what's going to be safe relative to providing service delivery to students in various parts of the campus. And we have students who actually need assistance, things like SJSU Cares, so that we can make sure that students have what they need.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm going to ask Bob Lim, our Vice President for Information Technology and CIO, to join you for this next question. What are the technology provisions with respect to equitable access to things like hotspots for internet connection and efforts to help students who have greater technology needs?
Thank you, Lisa. We've been anticipating this for the fall start, and we're working very closely with all the colleges across our campus to acquire more equipment like laptops, hotspots, mics, cameras to meet the needs of all of our students, our faculty, and our staff. In fact, for a full list, anybody can call our IMS Equipment Loaning Office or just visit our SJSU Work Anywhere website for your equipment needs. I will say that for specialized equipment that we don't carry, I would recommend that you reach out to your colleges as they may have them.
Thank you, Bob. Let me go back to Patrick. Patrick, are there resources available to students who have needs that they are unable to provide with their current financial aid packages or resources?
Certainly SJSU Cares is our primary delivery method for students who may have needs that haven't fallen neatly into their financial or sort of social support planning. And so we want people to avail themselves at the SJSU Cares website, and where they're going to be able to get connected with a case manager who can really sit down with them and talk through their specific need. And if it's something that we can reroute through financial aid and reconsider a financial aid package, or if we have to look at other considerations around, of course, food and housing insecurity or things in between, we will do that.
Thank you, Patrick. I realize that we are running short on time. So although there are a few questions for you about housing, let's plan to answer those through the Health Advisory's website and make your responses available to people that way. I'd like to ask Joanne Wright, our Senior Associate Vice President for University Personnel, to return. Thanks, Joanne. Could you answer a couple of questions that are closely related? Will there be accommodations for staff who can't come on campus to work because their children have virtual school or have elderly parents they care for? And then I think a related question is whether staff who have underlying conditions or staff who are over the age of 65 can work remotely.
Okay. So as to the first part about childcare or elderly parents to care, force of caregiving. So anyone who may need to discuss a possible leave, whether it's full-time, partial, or intermittent due to child care or other caregiving issues, should reach out to University Personnel Leaves Program Manager. His name is Josh Etherington, extremely helpful. He knows all about every leave that's out there, including the ones that have come into play during this situation, which includes the CSU CPAL leave program and the federal FICA program. Both of those programs are in place until December 31st, 2020, at least. I don't know if there's going to be any extensions on anything. We don't know, what the situation will be by the end of the year. But please don't hesitate to reach out to discuss options that you might need with Josh. So there also may be opportunities for flexibility with schedules. So this can be discussed with managers and employee relations as that arises. To the second part of your question about, it sounded like 65 and chronic, people with chronic conditions. So this again would be something that you'd want to talk to Josh about. As far as it sounds like there might be some medical situations that are happening. So you can reach out to him to talk about leaves. You can also, again, if there's some flexibility in your area of work, talk to your manager about working remotely. Now, so for now, there's only essential personnel on campus. So I guess I'm making an assumption that there is some remote work happening already. But again, reach out to Josh and he can go through your options with you.
Thank you. Now, what happens if employees are sent home with symptoms but don't have sick time? Or similarly, if an employee needs to stay home because they have self-checked for symptoms but don't have sick time available, can they be disciplined?
Okay, so our goal is to protect the health and safety of our entire campus community. So we would work with our employees who may be sent home for COVID-related reasons and who are concerned with their leave time. So as noted just a minute ago, there are COVID-specific leave programs available in addition to our regular leave programs. So definitely you need to speak with Josh and he can determine where you fall within those programs. So as far as being disciplined, if there's a self-check for symptoms and need to stay home, we do understand that there may be individual situations that we need to address. So we would look at specifics of each case to understand how best to work with employees and their units.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Traci Ferdolage, our Senior Associate Vice President for Facilities Development and Operations, to join us for this next question. Traci, how will the face covering requirement be enforced?
So our main goal is to protect the health and safety of our campus community. So face coverings are mandated at this time, and we ask everybody to come together and respect the public health requirements currently in place so that we can protect ourselves and each other. If there are situations where a community member is not respecting or is not appearing to respect the mandate, we'll address that on a case-by-case basis. Remember that there are instances where individuals may not be able to wear masks, and the reasons would not necessarily be provided to others due to privacy concerns. However, we do expect our community to respect the mandate and to work with one another and keep each other as safe as possible.
Thank you. Another set of questions for you have to do with the way that you are managing the facilities operations. What is the process for departments to obtain approval for an event that cannot meet virtually?
Right, so I would, my advice, we're working on this process with regard to event review and approval on campus. Certainly there are going to be some restrictions. All events need to be in compliance with the county guidelines. Right now, there's not an allowance for events being held indoors, and there's strict guidelines for any events being held outdoors, including a restriction on the number of people that may attend. We're working collaboratively with the various entities across the campus to try to develop a process by which we can ensure events are compliant. That entails us, well, my advice for people is to follow the normal process they have to request the event, but those that plan events will be working and collaborating with facilities development operations and with EH&S to review the event. And if it's possible to hold it and be in compliance with county guidelines and have a safe environment, then certainly those will be things that we'll be looking to do on campus.
Thank you. What kind of cleaning is SJSU doing on campus in classrooms and offices? Is it the same for all colleges, or is it determined on an individual basis?
Sure, that's a great question, and I know that this is a topic that everybody's very interested in understanding. Well, I can tell you that we have been doing a lot of cleaning throughout the summer. We continue to do what I would call our normal routine cleaning. But with COVID, we've done additional training with our custodial staff. We've bought specialized equipment to help them work efficiently. And we are moving some of our tasks around in a way that allow us to pay extra attention to those high-touch surfaces and areas of dense use. So it's not that we will be taking resources away from one area and focusing on another area, so much as FD&O will be taking an approach that's focused on where are our resources best utilized to provide the level of service necessary to maintain the campus while enhancing safety in those areas where the campus is most densely populated. But ultimately, all areas will be cleaned on a regular basis.
Thank you, Traci. I have one more question for you. It's helpful to know what the expectations are that our campus community can have. What can you say about all of the non-SJSU community members who come to campus? Will there be signs posted around campus about health and safety expectations or health and safety measures?
So the short answer is yes, but the more involved answer is that we have been working really hard within our team as well as with others across the campus to think about wayfinding and navigation and how that might happen in a manner that allows us to convey to people what they can do to be more safe, whether that's face coverings being required or walking on this side of a stair or only one way on stairs or one way in a hallway. So we're really giving a lot of thought to that. We do have a signage program that we will be rolling out across the campus. So in that week leading up to classes, you'll really start seeing that appear. And certainly it's going to be designed to give the message to any visitor as well as our students, faculty, and staff.
Thank you, Traci. We are at the end of our time for question and answer. I would just like to remind everyone that we anticipated we would not be able to get to all the questions that were submitted in advance, and certainly not all the questions that were submitted live. However, we will make sure to respond to the questions you've given to us on our Health Advisory's website. And at this time, I would like to turn it over to President Papazian to close our town hall.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you to all of you for sticking with us this afternoon. I was watching the participant number, and it's clear that there's a real hunger for information, and we will continue to try to be as transparent as we can, as responsive as we can. So do take Lisa's suggestion and keep checking the Health Advisory's website. As things develop and change, we'll continue to send out more information. And as we get closer to the start of the semester, if it turns out we need to gather this way again, we'll look at ways to do that, or in smaller groups where we can address your questions continually as things evolve. And we expect it will change and evolve in all kinds of directions over the next weeks and months. I just want to leave all of you with the just the reminder to stay well and stay safe, to take care of all of those who are close to you, and with some care and attention, we will continue to move forward on our important mission here at San Jose State, but doing so in a way that keeps all of us safe. So thank you so much, and we'll continue to be sharing with you as they develop.